friends. Welcome to episode 35 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian now for 12 years, and counting, I found myself asking the question, where is the podcast that will help me do my job? I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that the ideas expressed in this podcast are my own and do not reflect those of my district. When incorporating research, I always cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. Thank you, Facebook, for Misty from Georgia, who mentioned this podcast to others on a recent post because she said it is, quote, geared towards our profession specifically, end quote. She usually listens to the podcast while working around the house. And I will say, I tend to resent these daily chores, like emptying the dishwasher and folding laundry, less because I am multitasking, listening and learning to podcasts and audiobooks. I am curious as to what other librarians do over the summer, and don't expect an episode from me about all the things you could and should be doing over the summer. I know and work with educators whose attitudes about the summer run the gamut from radio silence and zero work related to school until the new year starts, to educators who will come in throughout the summer either as an employee or just to work on their spaces and to get them ready for the fall. I asked Misty if I could share her summer goals, and she said that she was planning to read Georgia's Picture Storybook Award nominees and then generate lessons which correspond to each of these, collaborating with a fellow media specialist named Aaron using a Google shared document. Misty also mentioned that she could work on shelving and cataloging items, but that she'd rather spend some time with her sons. I appreciate that she mentioned that there's always something which needs to be done, and this is the realization which comes very quickly when you work in a school library. You are never done, you leave at the end of the day, and there's always something waiting for you in the morning. Thank you for Librarian Twitter for Janelle, a K-5 media/tech instruction and research teacher, coincidentally also from the state of Georgia. Janelle says she usually listens to the podcast while driving to work. She was especially grateful for episode 45 minutes feels like forever because the resource guide was, quote, perfect to get me through the last few days, end quote. Janelle also mentioned that it has helped know that there were others out there facing the same highs and lows. I have to agree with Janelle. The more I learn about our listeners through social media, the more I learn how we share many of the same struggles, irrespective of the age of our students, the size of our budget, or just how vintage our buildings may be. I am grateful for Janelle's feedback because her title is so relevant to today's episode. Her title is K-5 Media/Tech Instruction and Research Teacher, and I appreciate just how descriptive this is. I think it is fair to say that regardless of what we call ourselves or what others call us, our jobs are multifaceted, and it falls to us to make sure that our buildings and staff know exactly how we can support all they do in the classroom. And now, for today's episode, Self-Advocacy. We are the resource. In April, I submitted the following post to our state newsletter for school librarians. It's titled, What's in a Name? Spend any time on Librarian Twitter, Facebook, and other social media platforms, and you'll quickly discover that across the United States, and the world even, we don't always call ourselves the same thing. Despite the fact that on January 16, 2010, AASL Board of Directors, quote, voted to adopt school librarian as the title which reflects the roles of the 21st century school library professional as a leader, instructional partner, information specialist, teacher, and program administrator, end quote. Perhaps you have heard of other competing titles, such as teacher librarians, media center director, library media specialist, library tech teacher, or library media technology specialist. I find myself explaining to my students that I'm a teacher, just like their classroom teacher, and I'm a teacher who went to library school. And then I have to convince them that library school is real, This is usually when I'm reminding them that the library isn't recess with books, but rather the library is a classroom with the same types of expectations of classroom behavior. What title do you use? Does it change to suit the circumstances? When I graduated in 2007, I assumed the title of Library Media Specialist because it was on all my documentation from my program. It still follows my name on my formal communication and on my email signature and on the last iteration of my resume. But more often, I take the lead of my students. When I am at Sam's Club shopping, or at Eastern Market, or at the gate waiting to catch a flight, my students will recognize me, and they'll point and they'll whisper to their parents, "That's my library teacher." Does it matter which label my students use? Not at all. It makes sense to them. Students call it like they see it. They tend to be the most honest and unfiltered people you will ever meet. When I introduce myself, socially or at work-related events, I'm a school librarian. I was finding the word media confuse some, and the word specialist conveyed both a sense of self-aggrandizement and insecurity, as if we needed to remind everybody lest it was forgotten. As nice as it would be to consider myself a specialist in anything, I'm reminded daily that I still have a lot to learn. And that was the end of my article that I wrote for my state newsletter, and I wanted to use it to segue into today's episode, because as much as I enjoy using the title school librarian, I'm also aware of just what an oversimplification the title happens to be. As you are well aware, there is so much more involved in what we do on an hourly basis. The challenge remains, how do we advocate for our position? And why do we need to advocate for ourselves anyway? You don't see the third grade teachers getting nervous when the contract negotiations begin. Nobody's going to cancel third grade. The AP government teacher and the calculus teacher don't need to advocate for themselves because their job isn't in jeopardy of being cut. There are a select few who understand our exact predicament. The elementary foreign language teachers, for example, those who teach in the elementary instrumental program, and elective teachers at the middle and high school level. We can't afford to become complacent in our jobs. We are constantly in a state of high alert, making sure that the decision makers at the district level see our contributions to our building as essential. Promoting ourselves and the impact we have on our students' education falls squarely on our shoulders. This episode will address how we can promote ourselves as the resource. What this episode is not is an episode on our library space as the resource. That is an episode for another day. Similarly, our collection as the resource. Again, an episode for another day. Rather, today, the issue is how to identify the strengths and skills we bring to our building and how best to ensure that our administration and staff recognize why having a full-time certified librarian is essential to each of our buildings. Irrespective of our location, remove us from the library because of our training and our degree and our experience. We ourselves are the resource to be tapped. There is a great infographic which my department chair sent us several years ago. And I don't print things often, but this is printed and displayed on my office, and I've attached a link in the show notes. It was created by Arlen Kimmelman in 2016. In the center is the title, Certified School Librarians, a District's Biggest Bargain. One salary gets you all of this. And surrounding this title are 8 pie shapes angled to look like the iris of a camera. Included in each pie shape is the salary and degree required according to the 2015 Bureau of Labor and Statistics. The 8 jobs listed are as follows: curriculum designer and instructional leader. Number 2 is a reading teacher. Number 3, instructional technology specialist, i.e. tech coach. Number 4, information resource specialist. Number 5, professional learning facilitator. Number 6, information literacy instructor. Number 7 is co-teacher. And number 8 is program administrator. At first glance, I think I'm not all of those things, but to a certain extent, I regularly enter each of those arenas. Do any one of those dominate my day? No. Because as somebody who is on a fixed schedule, my primary job responsibility is to teach the board-approved curriculum to my students. But I find that this infographic serves as an important reminder to me of all the potential my training and experience can offer to my building and my district. If my district and my building administrators don't know it, then it's my job to advocate for myself. So the saying goes, you are either at the table or on the menu. I firmly believe that I need to insert myself into as many conversations as possible as to protect my full-time employment. I would suggest meeting with your department so as to plan the best way to approach your particular administration, revisiting this with an eye for how we can be part of this conversation. Let's look at number 1, curriculum designer and instructional leader. I expect school librarians work on their own curriculum, but having a place at the table of a grade level or a subject meeting regarding curriculum can be tricky. Meeting with teachers means intruding, and this is where building relationships can really pay off. Sitting in on a meeting as the librarian representative can also be a challenge to schedule, as many of us provide release time for the teachers who are meeting. Attending these meetings might interfere with our own department meetings or even require us to miss school, depending on when these meetings are being scheduled. What could produce some collaborative results is by reaching out through email to the grade level leaders or the department chairs when the curriculum is up for revision. Tune in when new textbooks are introduced, or as was done recently with the Next Generation Science Standards, when those were adopted, having some resources ready will give the members on the committee a reason to include librarians in the conversation. Number 2 is reading teacher. Connecting with the reading specialist in your building is always a good idea, but this hasn't always been easy for me. Years ago, I stood aghast as I watched our reading specialist photocopy entire books because they were at the reading level that this person needed to use with a particular student. I offered to bring her as many books as she needed from the library, and I was refused. Because I'm constantly consulting with the grade level teachers about which students need guidance during checkout, I feel like we have a team effort. We all have students who are more interested in mimicking the checkout of their best friends than finding a book that really is something they can enjoy themselves. Working closely with the teachers and the reading specialist on the students' reading struggles does create this team effort, and again, it's important to be part of those conversations. Number 3, the instructional technology specialist, i.e. tech coach. My opportunities to be the tech coach comes during our Monday delayed start meetings, after school at Choice PD meetings, and at the district PD on Election Day in November. While I don't have any Google certifications, I am an enthusiast, and I love learning through YouTube tutorials and listening to podcasts. I love attending EdTech conferences and sharing out with the staff. When I am at the conferences, I'll sometimes email the relevant resources directly to the teachers I think would benefit most. When approaching my administration, with the hopes of them covering the cost of my registration fees and sub-coverage, I always make sure to mention that I will be sharing out at upcoming staff meetings and sending the resources to all of the staff members through email. And that is an important distinction that needs to be made. Because when a district sends a 5th grade teacher to a conference, they are looking specifically for 5th grade resources. When the district sends a school librarian, I'm assembling resources for the entire building to share out. The 4th job role is that of an information resource specialist. And if I understand the way this is described correctly, this is the compilation of all the resources needed to support the instruction in the classroom. Increasingly, I have taken to curating lists of permalinks to ebooks on the EBSCO ebook database and web resources. When, for example, my 4th grade teachers didn't find enough materials on the shelf regarding geology, I generated a resource page and emailed it to them. And I also emailed it to the 4th grade teachers in my other buildings, knowing that that unit would be coming up very soon. And the 5th role is one of my favorites, and that is professional learning facilitator. I love teaching PD. My district wisely realized that there are plenty of educators with skills who are willing to share. We just need the time to do so. Built into our calendar are several Choice PD meetings. 3 times during the school year, teachers can use this hour after school to meet with other teachers and use that time to support whatever best suits their needs. Our November Election Day PD is full day of choice. In September, teachers are encouraged to create sessions, which will then be compiled and offered to the district as a catalog. We then register for 2 classes in the morning and 2 classes in the afternoon. And this is a great opportunity for us to demonstrate our skills and be district leaders at the same time. The 6th role, information literacy instructor. I may be confusing this with digital citizenship, but ask any teacher in our building, and they will tell you that their librarians teach digital citizenship and internet safety across all grade levels. Aaron Wilkie-O, writing for Common Sense Media on April 8, 2019, wrote an article titled 10 Reasons Librarians Are More Important Than Ever. I'll be sure to attach a link in the show notes. And that is, quote, librarians keep us honest. In the age of fake news and viral video remixes, the library media specialist leads the charge in citation, copyright, and fair use, research, and news literacy, end quote. Number 7, as co-teacher, I'm aware that our middle school and high school librarians always co-teach, that classes come into the library and the teacher will be part of that instruction along with the librarian. I co-teach in so much that I synchronize my lessons in research skills with the Genius Hour and passion projects and Living Museum and research assignments that happen in the classroom. As soon as I hear these projects are on the teachers' calendars, they're on my plan book. I happily bump my lessons, and I always include a, quote, per teacher request, end quote, next to anything that has been moved or adjusted. Item number 8 is that of program administrator, and I will call upon a terrific infographic titled The Many Hats of the School Librarian, created by Abigail Levin, and you can follow her on Twitter at Cedar Readers, CEDAR Readers. I'll include a link in the show notes. She lists under Program Manager. Develops collections, supervises volunteers, manages the library schedule, although this is not always the case in every building. As program manager, the librarian oversees the budget, determines fundraising needs to ensure updated collection and vibrant programming, also serving on leadership teams and manages library communications, end quote. This last responsibility of managing the library communications is an upcoming episode scheduled for Season 2. Number 9, and there wasn't a number 9 because I'm adding it right now, Abigail Levin mentioned something that I hadn't seen in other lists, and that is a wellness partner. She lists school librarians as, quote, nurtures safe, inviting, inclusive community learning space. Develops social, emotional skills and self-awareness through literature, promotes digital wellness, fosters a growth mindset, expression, problem-solving via digital tools, end quote. And this issue is related to social emotional learning, which will be an episode already in the works for Season 2. Along those lines, I wanted to make sure to include 2 additional points made by Aaron Wilkie-O in the Common Sense article. And nowhere else in this research that I pulled does it say that school librarians, quote, make it okay to be unique. And she says, sure, it may be a stereotype, but come on, you know it's kind of true. After the art teachers, the librarians are the ones with the most unique style, personalities, and interests. And because of this, all kinds of kids feel comfortable with the school librarian. And librarians create safe spaces. No matter a student's skills or interests, the library welcomes everyone. It's a safe place to hang out with friends after school or a quiet place to be alone and research sensitive topics, end quote. I know I wasn't going to talk about the physical space, but the personality of the librarian will also play a huge role in just how welcoming the library is to everyone. I want to thank my fellow Michigan school librarians, Gwen Marchesano and Kathy Lester, who created another resource I'm sharing today. I'll include a link in the show notes, and it's titled The 21st Century School Library Media Specialist. I love the intro. We, quote, are certified teachers who empower students to be critical thinkers, enthusiastic readers, skillful researchers, and ethical users of information, end quote. In addition to the aforementioned roles, we are leaders serving on various building and district committees, as well as supporting building and district initiatives. Because we see all of the students, we provide a continuity of messaging across all the grade levels. Another service we provide, not mentioned earlier, is that of, quote, equal access to technology and resources to all students, especially important to at-risk students, end quote. This is a perfect time to introduce Elizabeth Hutchinson. And she's got an impressive list of accolades, a prolific writer on the topic of school libraries, and 16 years as a school librarian on the island of Guernsey, which is located in the English Channel. I recommend that you follow her on Twitter at ElizabethUTCH and visit her blog. I'll attach a link in the show notes. In particular, the post titled, Why Do Teachers Need Librarians?, which has been viewed more than 35,000 times, and with good reason. With respect to today's topic, I especially appreciate Elizabeth Hutchinson's approach, an article addressing the teachers and not the librarians. She said, quote, did you know that the school library can provide you with free resources for your subject that will relieve the pressure on your departmental budget and even your own pocket? That the library can provide space for these resources in the library so that your classroom is not full of resources that you only need once a year. And did you know that the school library can provide resources on request? Yes, if the budget is there, they will buy books for you. End quote. This is so critical when it seems like every article and post on social media is about how much of their own money teachers are spending on their classrooms and materials for their students. Shouldn't we be broadcasting the fact that the school libraries are here to make sure that teachers don't have to pay out of pocket? Keith Curry Lance's article, Why School Librarians Matter, posted on March 25th of 2018 for Phi Delta Kappa, the professional journal for educators. Again, a link can be accessed in the show notes. He emphasized utilizing school librarians as a, quote, cost-effective alternative. Librarians are in an advantageous position to coach faculty, and research shows that administrators want their librarians to provide professional development to teachers. Teachers feel less threatened and are willing to take risks when a peer, as opposed to an evaluator, helps them implement new instructional strategies, end quote. Another role mentioned in this article is important because it mentions the school librarians as chief information officers. We assess databases and web resources for consideration, and we regularly evaluate materials to be used for instruction based on the age appropriateness and accuracy and authoritative value. Last but not least, we are the keepers of the library. Keith Curry Lance said, quote, no business would allow an investment of that value to be unmanaged or disconnected from the primary mission of the organization, end quote. And yet, many of our libraries are left poorly supervised, understaffed, and a major thoroughfare with students and classes passing through on an hourly basis. I've mentioned this in earlier episodes that it is absolutely incredible to believe that a resource of this scope and investment, of continued investment year after year after year, is oftentimes left unlocked and available for groups to access throughout the evening hours and before school. At this point, somebody might be wondering to themselves, what about the future-ready librarians? What about all their documentation about the roles of librarians as leaders? Unless you've been living under a rock, you have encountered the future-ready librarians across all social media platforms and the published articles and showcased in presentations across the country. I have been lucky to attend all-day sessions, and the materials and resources made available to us is phenomenal. Raising the profile of what we do on a daily basis is essential to preserving our role in the school community. Ever so often, I get a reminder that even on the most basic level, I'm not adequately supporting my staff. And this is probably because I'm on 4 buildings' email lists, but I will see these types of emails every month or so. An email will be sent to all the building teachers, or worse, to building everybody, from a teacher, always in the early hours of the morning, and it goes something like this. Hi, everybody. Would anybody happen to have 4 copies of Despero? I need them to use today, this morning. Thanks so much. And I take these kinds of emails very personally. I almost feel like saying, hello. We have a library with 25,000 volumes and an interlibrary loan network of 16 schools and public libraries, and yet you just emailed 40 to 50 people who work in your building, clogging their email boxes because you need 4 books. I know for a fact the custodial team does not appreciate having to read through these emails, nor does the gym teacher or the art teacher, the strings or woodwinds or brass teacher, the Spanish teacher, the school psychologist, or the social worker. Invariably, about 14 minutes later, that same teacher will send out yet another email to everyone, indicating that that person was able to track down the necessary copies. Depending on the time and the day, I'll walk down and try and catch that teacher in their room or reply through email if I happen to be in a different building that day. I'm reminded of this sort of twinge of annoyance that most teachers maintain a considerable classroom library, which they amass over a career, and I appreciate the advantages of having this type of immediate access for students is crucial. And if you'd like to take a listen to my episode on classroom libraries, rivals, or partners, that would fit in nicely with today's discussion. But I read a post on Facebook similarly angered a school librarian who had just found out that a teacher received an impressive grant to buy books, most of which were already available on the library bookshelves. On occasion, especially when I've been assigned to a new building and I'm getting to know the teachers, I'll let them know that I'm generating an order to place soon, and if they would please send some titles that they'd like me to be included. And I find out approximately 80 to 90% of those books are either currently located on our library shelves or on one of the 16 libraries, and we could have those copies delivered to our building in a matter of days. The last 10% or so are typically books which are due to be published over the summer, and they're already on my order because they haven't come out yet. While I can't change the fact that many teachers leave planning to the last minute, there are a couple things we could do to begin to educate our staff in a way that doesn't come across as patronizing, but rather assisting teachers in accessing the OPAC and requesting materials. The ironic thing is that I teach their students how to access and interpret the OPAC screens. I wrongfully assumed that the teachers knew how to do this as well. Because we have very little staff turnover, this could easily be a 10-minute demo, which is built into a staff meeting. I need to be more proactive and planful about educating the staff. Given that the principals schedule staff time in the days preceding the start of the school year, why not ask for 30 minutes? Demo the OPAC, the library resource page, an introduction to databases and online encyclopedia access. I do make a point of meeting with the new hires and the transfers to the building, but if I gave a presentation to the entire staff, what's the worst thing I might do? Bore somebody with information they already know? Let me tell you, they're already bored. Monopolizing teachers' time in the days before school starts with meetings, while some degree is necessary, is a hugely unpopular thing to do. And the trade-off is that I'm not singling out any one particular staff member, and hopefully this will cut down on those group emails and empower the teachers to plan ahead. Teaching my students about plagiarism, copyright, and fair use, starting in the 2nd grade, are some of the most impactful lessons I have all year. So much of this goes hand in hand with our research skills lessons. If our students are going to have the world at their fingertips, they have to understand the responsible use of everything they encounter. I'm also very aware that these lessons are shared at the dinner table. When parents meet me at open house or back to school night or at conferences, oftentimes it's these lessons which the parents will mention to me. This past spring, a federal jury in Texas awarded $9.2 million to Dynastudy after employees of the Houston ISD on multiple occasions violated copyright by removing the copyright warnings on materials and replicating study guides. In all, 36 study guides were replicated over many years. This story is disappointing on so many levels. No doubt, curriculum directors and administrators around the country learned an important lesson from this costly mistake. And I'm sorry it happened, because anytime a district has to spend money for legal damages and not towards educating our children, that's a horrible loss. Plenty of librarians took to Twitter and declared, "Why weren't the librarians consulted? Had a librarian been in the room, this wouldn't have happened." The truth is, librarians should be a part of the conversation when educational materials are being curated and when the curricula is being designed. We should always be modeling the responsible way to disseminate copyrighted material and instruct others in PD. It is worth mentioning that in addition to paying out these damages, the HISD will require, quote, all employees now participate in online training on copyright laws at the beginning of each school year, with principals receiving additional in-person training, end quote. Offering to teach a PD on copyright and the use of materials for educational purposes would be an incredibly valuable service librarians could provide for their district. I am fairly certain I had planned at the outset of this episode to provide more suggestions and ways to advocate for ourselves. And this may be one of those episodes which creates more questions than answers. But if I could suggest, print out the infographics which I described in today's podcast. Tape them in a bullet journal or a notebook. Tape them to your office wall and let them inspire you to be more mindful in how you interact with everyone in your building and across your district. See them not so much as a to-do list, but a list of motivation and encouragement. When your administrator asks what goal you have in mind next year, think about ways that you can both support your students and staff and advocate for yourself. I would like to extend a special thank you to everyone whose resources made recording this episode so meaningful, and to the listeners whose feedback helped plan the direction of the upcoming episodes each week. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions, either on Facebook or Twitter, or at my email address, schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I will be sure to send you a podcast sticker. I promise my listeners who are starting in the fall their very own libraries, their first-year librarians, an episode dedicated to them and all the advice they should consider. What would you say to a first-year librarian? What do you wish you knew when you started? And what should a first-year librarian know that will help them? I've included a link in the show notes to my podcast webpage to leave a SpeakPipe voice message to be included in episode 1 of season 2. If you prefer, email me your advice and I'll read it aloud in the episode. I will be taking next week off as I will be attending ITSE in Philadelphia for the very first time. If you should happen to also be attending, send me an email or a DM, and I'll be sure to have my microphone, and I would love to do some quick on-the-spot interviews to include in a follow-up episode when I get back. My plan is to share out resources that we can all use. Look for a new episode, I'm guessing, before July 1st. I hope you will tune in.